In October of 2017, astronomers scanning the sky for asteroids spotted a faint point of light moving fast. So fast that within days it became clear this wasn't just another rock looping around the sun. This thing was on a one-way path. It wasn't bound to our solar system at all. It had come from the dark between stars. They named it One-Eye Oumuamua, the first interstellar object ever confirmed passing through our neighborhood. And almost immediately, the story started to split in two. On one side, the cautious, methodical reality of limited data. On the other, the kind of mystery that practically begs for a headline. Because Oumuamua did something that's still hard to summarize in a single sentence. It didn't behave like a normal asteroid. It didn't behave like a normal comet. And for a brief moment, before it faded beyond our telescopes, its strange motion created a question that refuses to die. What if this wasn't just space debris? What if, in some form, it was biological? Not a comet, not a rock, but something closer to a cell. Or at least something that forces us to confront the possibility that the boundary between astronomy and biology might not stop at Earth's atmosphere. To understand why anyone would even consider that idea, you have to start with what scientists expected to see, and what they actually saw. When an icy body swings close to the sun, it usually gives itself away. Sunlight warms the surface, trapped ices begin to sublimate, and gas escapes in jets. That outgassing acts like tiny thrusters. It can nudge the object's path, change its spin, and create the classic signatures of a comet, a coma, dust, and sometimes a tail that stretches for millions of kilometers. So when Oumuamua's trajectory showed a subtle extra push, an acceleration that gravity alone didn't explain, the immediate thought was simple: comet-like outgassing. The problem was, telescopes didn't see the usual comet evidence. No obvious coma, no clear dust tail, just a dim object fading fast as it raced away. And then came the shape. Oumuamua's brightness changed dramatically as it rotated, suggesting it was either extremely elongated, like a cigar, or unusually flat, like a pancake. Either way, it didn't look like the kinds of asteroids we're used to. It looked extreme, like something that had been stretched, shredded, or sculpted by forces we don't fully understand. So now you have three oddities stacked on top of each other: an interstellar origin, an unusual shape, and a non-gravitational acceleration without an obvious comet plume. That combination is rocket fuel for speculation, and speculation arrived right on schedule. Some researchers proposed that the acceleration could still be outgassing, just not the kind we easily detect. Maybe the object was releasing gas with very little dust, or it was venting a volatile that's hard to observe from Earth. Others explored stranger but still natural explanations. Perhaps it was a fragment of exotic ice, or a porous, fluffy aggregate with a huge surface area, so sunlight and particle interactions affected it more than a dense rock. And then, inevitably, came the ideas that sound like science fiction: thin, sail-like shapes pushed by sunlight, or even artificial origins. But the cell framing takes the story in a different direction. It's not necessarily saying, this is an alien spaceship. It's asking something both simpler and more unsettling. Could something from another star system arrive here carrying the fingerprints of biology? Or even being biology in a dormant form? The moment you ask that, you run into a basic problem. We use the word alive casually, but in science it's a high bar. Life, as we know it, isn't just complicated chemistry. It's a system that maintains itself, processes energy, responds to its environment, and, most importantly, can reproduce with variation. A comet doesn't do that. An asteroid doesn't do that. A cell does. So if an object in space is going to be alive, it has to either be actively living out there, or it has to be capable of becoming active again. Dormant, waiting, preserved, like a seed, like a spore, like a cell trapped in ice. That idea has a name: Panspermia, the hypothesis that life, or the building blocks of life, can travel between worlds. It's controversial in the sense that it's hard to prove and easy to overclaim, but the underlying pieces of it are not fantasy. We already know space is full of organic molecules. We know comets and asteroids can deliver complex chemistry. We know impacts can eject rock from one planet and send it into space. And we know some organisms on Earth can survive conditions that would kill almost everything else. The question isn't, can anything survive in space for a few seconds? The real question is, can anything survive the brutal, long-duration reality of interstellar travel? Because interstellar space is not just cold and empty, it's hostile in slow motion. There's vacuum, there's intense radiation, there's bombardment by high-energy particles, there's time, millions of years of time, during which complex molecules can be broken apart and DNA can accumulate damage until it's just chemical noise. And yet, life on Earth has already shown an uncomfortable talent for persistence. Some microbes form spores that can remain dormant for long periods. Some organisms tolerate extreme desiccation. Some can endure high radiation doses compared to typical life. Experiments outside spacecraft and on the International Space Station have shown that certain microorganisms can survive exposure to space for extended periods, especially if they're shielded from direct UV radiation. Shielding is everything. A single exposed cell drifting in interstellar space is likely to be sterilized, but a cell inside a clump of rock, under a crust of ice, embedded within a porous matrix, now you're not talking about a naked organism. You're talking about a package. And Oumuamua, whatever it was a package from another star. That's the emotional core of this entire story. Not that Oumuamua was alive in the way a fish is alive, but that it was a physical messenger from beyond the solar system. Something that formed in another system's chemistry and then arrived here without asking permission. Now, here's where the story gets even more interesting. Oumuamua wasn't alone for long. In 2019, astronomers discovered another interstellar visitor, Turii Borisov. This one looked much more like what people expected. It behaved like a comet. It showed a coma. It released gas and dust. It was clearly an icy body from another star system. That matters because it tells us something crucial. Interstellar objects aren't one-off miracles. They're part of a population. They pass through. We just weren't good enough at spotting them until recently. So if objects from other star systems can enter ours, and if at least some of them are rich in ices and chemistry, then the big question becomes statistical, not mythical. How often does the galaxy trade material between planetary systems? And if it trades material, does it trade chemistry? Does it trade prebiotic building blocks? Could it trade biology? That is the scientific version of the alive headline. It's not claiming certainty. It's asking whether the universe might be more connected than our intuition suggests. But we still haven't dealt with the central mystery, the acceleration. If Oumuamua was outgassing, why didn't we see the usual signs? One possibility is that we simply didn't catch it at the right moment with the right instruments. Oumuamua was discovered after it had already passed closest approach to the Sun. We were chasing it as it fled, watching it get fainter by the day. The window was short and the data was limited. Another possibility is that the outgassing was real, but the gas was hard to detect from Earth. especially if it was dominated by a volatile that doesn't produce a bright, dusty coma. Yet another possibility is that the acceleration wasn't outgassing at all. Maybe it was sunlight pushing on an object with a very high area-to-mass ratio, something thin or extremely porous, or shaped in a way that made it unusually responsive to radiation pressure. Notice what all these explanations have in common. None of them require the object to be alive, and that's important, because the cell idea sits on top of a stack of uncertainties. The more uncertainty you have, the easier it is to build a dramatic story. So what would it take to move alive from headline bait to scientific claim? It would take evidence you can't explain with geology and physics alone. It would take a signature of biology, complex patterns of organic molecules that strongly suggest metabolism or replication, isotopic ratios that match biological processing, or, best of all, direct sampling that reveals structures that are unmistakably cellular and chemically alive, not just cell-like shapes that can be mimicked by non-living processes. And we didn't get that. Not from Oumuamua. We didn't get samples. We didn't get close-up imagery. We got light curves, trajectories, and a fading dot, which means the honest version of this story isn't scientists now believe it's alive. The honest version is Oumuamua was weird enough that it exposed a gap in our understanding, and that gap is large enough that even radical hypotheses can squeeze inside. That sounds less explosive, but it's actually more powerful, because it reveals something true about the edge of human knowledge. The frontier isn't a wall. It's a fog. When something emerges from the fog, the first job of science is not to declare what it is. The first job is to narrow what it could be. And Oumuamua forced scientists to build that narrowing process in public, in real time, with the whole world watching. There's also another layer to the cell framing that makes it stick: the way the universe scales. A comet feels small when you look at it from Earth, but it's still kilometers of ice and rock. A cell feels small in your hand, but it's an entire world of machinery, chemistry, and information. Put those two things in the same sentence, comet and cell, and suddenly the cosmos feels personal. Like the galaxy isn't just stars and dust, but potential ecology. That's why this story goes viral. It's not really about one object. It's about what people want the universe to be. Not silent, not sterile, but connected. Alive in a way we haven't proven, but can't stop imagining. And here's the twist. The way to answer the question isn't to argue harder. It's to catch the next one. Because interstellar objects move fast. By the time we find them, they're already leaving. To truly solve this mystery, we need early detection and rapid response, telescopes that spot incoming visitors sooner, and missions designed to intercept them. The next time something like Oumuamua enters the solar system, the dream scenario is simple. We don't just watch it from Earth. We chase it. We photograph it up close. We measure its composition directly. We sniff the gases, if there are any. We analyze the dust. And if we can, we return samples. That's when alive becomes testable. Until then, this story lives in the tension between what we observed and what we can't yet confirm. Oumuamua arrived without warning, offered a handful of puzzling clues, and disappeared back into interstellar night. In that sense, it behaved less like a comet and more like a message written in a language we're still learning to read. Maybe it was a natural fragment of exotic ice. Maybe it was a porous shard shaped by collisions in a system we'll never visit. Maybe it was pushed by sunlight in a way that made it look, briefly, impossible. And maybe, at the far edge of possibility, It was carrying chemistry that once belonged to something living. But the most defensible conclusion, right now, is also the most haunting. We don't know. And now that we've seen one interstellar visitor, and then another, we can't pretend the question won't come back. The galaxy is tossing objects between stars. Some of those objects are icy. Some are chemically rich. And somewhere out there, on some world we haven't found yet, life may have already learned how to ride those currents. So, when you hear, not a comet, but a cell, treat it like a challenge, not an answer. A challenge to build the instruments. A challenge to launch the missions. A challenge to be ready the next time a faint point of light appears in the sky, moving too fast to belong here, bringing the outside in, and daring us to figure out what it really is before it vanishes again.